Welcome to the Thursday webinar. Thank you for participating. My name is Anselmo Lee. I'm from Seoul, South Korea. I'm the moderator of today's session, but this is not the first time. I've been moderating from the beginning. I think this is a 12th session. We started almost 2 months ago, more than 2 months ago, covering various issues related to the COVID-19 from SDG and human rights perspective, So previously we did on migration, peace building, and many other issues. But today, as you see in the program, we have 4 speakers. Main topic is global citizenship education. In terms of SDG, we call 4.7, You can see in the program, there's the full text of the target. There are, you used to say, 7 or 8 components in this 4.7. ESD, education for sustainable development, human rights, gender equality, peace building, culture, cultural diversity, and lifestyle, many things, So to address this issue, we have invited 2 great experts in Asia and also 2 practitioners. So we have a 20-minute presentation from Dr. Lim from UNESCO and also Rajesh Tandon from Priya in India, who has been working on this issue for 20-30 years. And then we'll invite the 2 discussants, one from Jeff from you're in Osaka, right? Now, Osaka, Japan. Yeah. Working for Human Rights Osaka, which is a Asia Pacific NGO working on human rights education, and also Eno Nakamura, very well-known practitioner of the ESD, Education for Sustainable Development. I'm so happy to have four of you at the same time. Thanks to COVID, it's not possible to have 4 of you like this. It's impossible, physically, So I'm really excited to have a really good discussion on this issue, which I'm also personally very much interested. I'm really keen to learn more from all of you, okay? With a short introduction, so we are going to begin. First, Dr. Lim, you have a 20-minute presentation about what UNESCO has been doing about your own organization, and then followed by Rajesh Tandon about his academic, philosophical, or practitioner's point of view from India. Okay, Dr. Lim, without further ado, you have a floor, please.
Okay, thank you, Anselmo. Good afternoon, colleagues and friends. I thank the organizers of this seminar for inviting me to share my thoughts regarding challenges to GCED, global citizenship education, posed by COVID-19. First of all, on behalf of APCEIU, as we call it, I convey our best regards and wishes to you all in this time of pandemic crisis. Let me start by sharing several important lessons from COVID-19 for GCED. First point is that global solidarity and cooperation is vital. This is very clear. We will realize again there are common challenges such as pandemics, climate change, and widening inequality can only be tackled through global solidarity and cooperation based on our sense of common humanity. In today's interconnected world, no one or no country can be safe alone. The weaker global solidarity remains, the bigger becomes a global crisis. Secondly, citizens' action is key. Citizens' attitude and action have proven to be the key to lowering the damage of COVID-19. We are seeing cases of stigmatization, hatred, discrimination increasing in many parts of the world in the context of the current pandemic. But such attitudes and behaviors only hamper our common efforts to overcome this crisis. So education is important. But we should also work together with media and information, because today information spread through social media influences people of all ages so strongly and rapidly. So the third point is that media and information literacy is critical. Accurate and scientific information is essential for citizens' responsible actions. Fake news, hate expression, and disinformation are extremely harmful in pandemic crisis. Therefore, it is essential that people of all ages develop media and information literacy to critically analyze and share information responsibly. Next point is the importance of fight against xenophobic nationalism. Given the rise of xenophobia, nationalism, and protectionism in many parts of the world, today I'm concerned that national egoism and isolationism may win over global solidarity and cooperation. So in order to avoid this bleak scenario, we should note that citizens' decisions and collective actions will determine the direction of a post-corona world. Whether we will see more global solidarity and cooperation or more national egoism and isolationism depends upon decisions that governments and citizens make together today. So it is vital that citizens should be empowered to critically analyze and reject incitement to xenophobia, racism, and hate. And GCD, of course, has an important role to play in this. Climate crisis and ecological crisis should not be overshadowed by the coronavirus pandemic. In fact, they are closely interlinked. Scientists say that climate change has contributed to destruction of ecosystems, which has led to more contacts between humans and wild animals like bats. This has generated more chances of virus infection from wild animals. If this is the case, it may be possible to have multiple crises: pandemic crisis, climate crisis, and ecological crisis, and also inequality crisis. So my last point is that inequalities matter. Economic inequality is worsening the pandemic, and vice versa. COVID-19 is widening the already existing inequality. These days, we hear many experts make comments on the future of globalization. Some say that globalization will continue, while others predict that globalization will be slowed or even discontinued. As far as GCED is concerned, I think it is important to note that globalization has so far widened the wealth gap in many parts of the world, and we need to seek an alternative globalization based on the principle of global solidarity and cooperation. Now, let me turn to challenges to GCED. First of all, in this pandemic crisis, priority is given to slowing down the spread of virus and saving lives. And in education, priority is ensuring access or continuity of learning through online or distance education. Little attention is paid to educational content. So it is not easy to advocate the importance of GCED in responding to the pandemic crisis. Besides, there is shortage of GCED resources, which are effective for countering racism, xenophobia, and hatred. Secondly, GCED for adults is a big challenge. Of course, introducing or reinforcing GCD in school education is not an easy task, since school education is generally geared towards strong national identity and patriotism in most countries. Introducing GCD in adult education is even more challenging, since adults tend to have accumulated more stereotypes and prejudices than younger generations. But their influence becomes even stronger in this pandemic because they stay at home with their children and spend a lot of time together. So we need some innovative ways for adult education on global citizenship. Collaboration between local governments and civil society is important in this regard. Lastly, I think the biggest challenge is to develop a new paradigm for GCD. This sounds like a theoretical issue, but it is very important for practicing GCD on the ground. First of all, we need a concept of citizenship which is appropriate for this pandemic crisis and beyond. Global citizenship is based on the concept of citizenship, and citizenship normally means two things. Citizenship means a set of virtues citizens are supposed to embody and display as bearers of rights and duties in a democratic society. And also citizenship means membership to a certain state. But in the COVID-19 pandemic, citizenship as membership is given more importance and leads to exclusion of many vulnerable groups like minorities and refugees and other people. We also need a better understanding of relationship between national citizenship and global citizenship. So far, we tend to think that national citizenship can be reconciled with global citizenship. But in times of crisis like today, this is doubted, and many people put national citizenship first. And more fundamentally, we come to think about the meaning and purpose of education, particularly because students have to stay home and have online or distance learning. Lastly, let me talk about the UNESCO's action with regard to GCED's response to COVID-19. Now UNESCO is having this webinar on education response to COVID-19. They are dealing with ensuring equity in remote learning, maintaining continuity of learning issues, and also gender dimensions of school closures, and the preparing for reopening of schools, including safety issues, of course. And most recently, this webinar dealt with disinformation and hate speech, and from the perspective of digital citizenship. And last month, UNESCO launched this group of friends for solidarity and inclusion with global citizenship education. This group of friends has, as members, 11 countries, 11 UNESCO member countries: Armenia, Austria, Bangladesh, Colombia, Italy, Jordan, Kenya, the Philippines, Republic of Korea, Senegal, and Serbia. The objective of this group is to advocate the role of GCED in responding to COVID-19. And it is focusing on countering hate, discrimination, and stigmatization. And it is planning to have high-level meetings like ambassadors meetings, and also roundtables bringing together experts and practitioners and policymakers to highlight the role of GCED and share best good example of practices. And of course, advocate the importance of GCED in responding to COVID-19. And also, let me briefly mention our activities, APSEU's actions We are planning to publish a book on COVID-19 from GCD perspective, focusing on social aspects of COVID-19 and human rights and safety of community. There is some tension between this human rights and safety community, but we believe that this tension can be harmonized. And also hatred and discrimination issue and citizens collective action and information literacy issue, and lastly globalization and international cooperation. We are going to distribute this book next month in Korean language, and later this year we are going to distribute English version. And we are also planning to have a series of activities later this year. We will develop a teaching and learning material on COVID-19 from GCD perspective, and we will develop an online course on COVID-19 and GCD. And this will be available from September this year. And the International Conference on GCD is our annual activity, but this year we will focus on this particular topic, COVID-19 and GCD. And this will be in November this year. And we will conduct research on international understanding and cooperation in education in a post-corona world. We think it is important to look at the role of education in a post-corona world, which may be more nationalistic or protectionism driven rather than global solidarity or cooperation. So this is the end of my presentation. Thank you for listening. Thank you very much.
Anselmo, we can't hear you.
Okay, sorry. Can you hear me now? Okay, thank you, the Director Lim, for your excellent presentation, which helped us to understand what are the key issues related to the GCD and also UNESCO. And of course, I have a lot of questions, a lot of jargons, the concepts, digital citizenship. Oh my God. So maybe I will raise that question later on. And then let's move quickly to Yash Tandon, because I'm sure that he will give us a very good substantive input. And then I think it's good to have both, which are very complementary. Yash Tandon, you have a floor, 20 minutes, please.
Thank you very much, everybody. Let me say hello to you once again, and let me see if I can share my presentation with you. Can you see it now?
Yes.
Excellent, excellent. Thank you. Thank you for this opportunity, Anselmo and Dr. Lim, very useful. I want to compliment the presentation that Dr. Lim has already made. And I want to look at globalizing citizenship education from the bottom up, not the top down. And that's why my title is Localizing Global Citizenship Education. You can understand global from the local you are standing on. And if anything, the pandemic and the consequent lockdown has once again demonstrated the value of the local. It is only at the local that people could help each other. It's only at the local they could get food and water. It's only at the local they could say hello. And all the global elites and global decision makers were locked in their own rooms, bathrooms or bedrooms, and only the local mattered. local action mattered, local institutions mattered, local citizen action mattered, local citizen leadership mattered. But in these 3 months, a very important global citizenship education has taken place, and that is the subtitle of my presentation, which says Lives Matter. I don't think in global citizenship education, in any of the UN covenants, in any of our civil society campaigns, we have ever given the emphasis to say health is a human right. Health matters. Lives matter. How do they matter? This is a propaganda slide, so I'm going to skip it. This is meant for your when you want to go to sleep, read it, and I will send you more links to going to sleep. Now, what if education is taking place? I mean, learning must be happening, because you can teach, but unless I learn, no education has happened for me. And a lot of education is wrapped up in teaching. What should teachers do? What is the training manual? What is the course outline? What is the design? What is the online platform? But very few people worry about the learner and the learning process. So because I'm taking global citizenship education from the bottom up, I'm concerned about learning. So learning to do. Remember, UNESCO talked about learning to do in the very beginning, in the 70s. So when COVID-19 began, at least in this region, March, I mean, in your region in maybe February, maybe January, and we won't go before that because it's a political contestation. We don't want to get into that when it began. So suddenly, everybody started talking about 3 things you have to do. Wash your hand, social distancing, stay at home. I've got a picture for you here. This is the largest slum of Asia called Dharavi. 2.5 million people are supposed to live there. We don't know how many live. Nobody has the data. In Mumbai. So, social distancing is a confusing message. Social distancing means hierarchy, discrimination, the caste system, religious distancing. Hindus won't eat with Muslims. Protestants won't sit with Catholics. Physical distancing. And of course, WHO and other experts started giving norms. How much physical distancing? 1 meter, 1.5 meter, 2 meter. But when you have 6 people live in 200 square feet, the way they maintain physical distance is by leaving the house, not staying in the house. They walk on the street and they sleep in the park. So, who's doing physical distancing? People like me who live in middle-class 3-bedroom houses, and each one of us, there are 3 of us, each one occupies 1 room. Washing hands. Some of these people have to pay $2 to buy water, drinking water, cooking water. You think they're going to wash hands with it? How much water you get? There are parts of the country and the region where there is desert. There's a problem of access to water for survival. And then, of course, stay at home. How many people have home? Whose home we will stay in? Maids are working in people's homes. That's not their home. So, learning to do. All these learnings happened, interestingly, by those who were living in this slum kind of an informal settlement, but it also happened for people like us, because we realized that all these sermons, these principles, these moral statements we gave, wash your hand and all, it only works for us, nobody else. And that's the larger number. Then by May, He said, when lockdown continued, millions of migrant workers started going home. Migrant workers matter. Who are they? Even the best country in this region, Asia Pacific region, called Singapore, declared victory over Corona only to discover that they forgot about migrant workers and where they live. This is how they live. They live in dormitories, 10 to a room. There are migrant women workers in textile mills, in Sri Lanka, in Bangladesh. There are migrant workers who have come from other countries, in Indonesia, in Malaysia, in Singapore, perhaps in Japan, Korea as well. We forget about them. They come, they are our maids, they are drivers, they do all the dirty job that nobody else does. And in our case, in India, we had migrant workers who had to travel 2,000 kilometers by foot because everybody wanted them not to move because they said, you're carrying infection. They are saying, we are hungry, we want to go home and be with our loved ones because you're not providing food, you're not providing salary, you're not providing shelter. Migrant workers have most unprotected, vulnerable, insecure, lowly paid jobs everywhere in the world. So, then domestic maids matter. Domestic maids were asked to not come, lockdown. Then they were told, as Dr. Lim said, you are bringing infection. Domestic maid said, but we have never traveled abroad. We don't even have a Rajat passport. We have a ration card, barely. You are telling us not to come to your house because we will bring infection. Domestic workers have not been paid. They have been asked to leave. Their kids are unable to go to school. And these are the studies that you can see that were done by Martha Farrell Foundation here in India, but also there is a global coalition of domestic workers federation. And 2 days ago on 16 June, on the day of International Day of Domestic Workers, they have released a manifesto. And that manifesto only says, understand us, our situation. Dr. Lim has already mentioned about access to online technology. Less than 15% households in India have internet connection. 1.5. Delhi University has announced last week online examination where students must have minimum 4G connectivity. 80% of the students do not have. They barely have 2G. These girls who were going to school, they were getting the experience of being free and less harassment, more empowerment. Lockdown, forced to stay at home and do all the housework, back to square one. And violence against them has been increasing. In many households, they don't have an individual smartphone, so they have no way to even complain. So adolescent girls locked at home also matter. Then, of course, we come to June. We are in June. Learning to learn. Mobility has begun. You know, many countries in the region have started saying unlock. Even after relocking, Singapore unlocked last week. You know, of course, some countries like China, Beijing, I hear that they are relocking. So as mobility began, what do people discover? Inequality in access to healthcare. Dr. Lim was talking about widening gap of inequality. Pandemic may have caused widening, but most importantly, pandemic exposed inequality. It exposed the naked inequality in access to basic services. You want to understand inequality, global citizenship, education? See this. And not just in South Asia or Southeast Asia. In US, more blacks are dying. More blacks are dying. In Brazil, in Italy, more elderly people dying who were staying in care home. Nobody bothered about them. They died. Boom. Italy, Spain, France, UK. Global citizenship education. Inequality in access to healthcare is not just in Bangladesh or Myanmar, also in US. Global. In Italy. Then you hear about digital distress because of compulsory education. Exams have to be held, courses have to be held. Parents are locked in because schools are teaching online to 8-year-old. There's one machine in the family. Who you think will get it? First the child, then the father, maybe the daughter in the late afternoon, mother midnight. But education is compulsory. If you don't do it, your child will lose, won't get promoted. You will not be able to complete the exam. You can see. Dr. Lim talked about climate change and ecological change. Everybody got fresh air. In most places, even the most polluted cities of the world, whether it is Los Angeles or whether it is Mumbai or whether it is Shanghai or whatever, everybody got some fresh. Global citizenship education. You leave the environment on its own, it gives you fresh air. You don't need to tell the environment to teach, to give you fresh air. Leave it alone. Don't harass it. Don't intimidate it. Don't destroy. Global citizenship education. Fresh air everywhere. Why? Human activity locked down everywhere. Conclusion, lock down human activity, breathe fresh air. Now going forward, citizenship has to be learned in everyday life. You can learn it from books, you can learn it in classroom, you can give it lectures. The theory is great. But unless I look at my life, my everyday life. So, what did the pandemic teach us? Disparities, exclusions, inequalities are universal. Education for sustainable development, education for human rights, education for universal human rights. They are universal. Because I experienced it. I know other people who experienced it. And because I was not so busy, trying to be busy, I had time to look at how others were being treated. I paid attention to maids, migrant workers, blacks, Hispanics, the tribals, indigenous people in Amazon being lifted by planes because they're dying in Amazon. Why? Because the government decided to burn the forest in order to increase the GDP. And of course, hardly any country. WHO says pandemic is a health crisis. But the solution in most countries is treat it as a law and order problem and use the police Even the apps that have been made are surveillance, doing more surveillance of citizen movement than health. So greatest invisible, surreptitious violation of human rights is going on. Around the world, it is universal. Even violation of human rights by security agencies is universal. Whether it is Minneapolis, or whether it is Hong Kong, or whether it is Mumbai, or whether it is Kuala Lumpur. Dr. Lim said, ecological, yes, we need to be serious about climate and ecological conservation. The model of economic development we have been pursuing for the last 200 years is up for renewal if we are serious. Because the lockdown, nature needs space and time. On 5th of June, on World Environment Day, after 1972, 48 years have passed on World Environment Day. How many times we will celebrate United Nations World Environment Day? This time the theme was time for nature. Time for nature, free nature, lock down human activity. Okay, don't lock down, substantially reduce. Substantially reduce. And if you reduce activity, you reduce consumption. Change your consumption pattern. You don't need 25 pairs of shoes if you walk only 5 kilometers a day in any case. So, Dr. Lim was talking about new formulations of theory. Citizenship, historically, has been understood as state-determined and state-mandated. The relationship between individual citizen and the state, that's why they were called nation-state. This is 1756. It's not very old. So, we are treated as citizen, or whether national citizen or provincial citizen or non-citizen, vis-a-vis the state. That's a monolithic, monochronic definition. A broader definition of citizenship, even before the state came into being, is horizontal relationship in my community, starting from my family, in my neighborhood, in my society. And horizontally, citizens relate to each other. They have rights and obligations horizontally. First, where these horizontal rights are destroyed, the only right you claim is vis-a-vis the state. Don't forget that indigenous communities, earlier societies, organized themselves around horizontal citizenship. And their norms were to be followed, and if you didn't follow, there was sanction attached to it. They didn't have written laws and constitution and all this. Written in English language or some language that half the population doesn't even read. So horizontal relationship is based on principles of belongingness, accountability, individual and collective accountability. It is in horizontal relationship that citizenship is collective. In the vertical, it is one-on-one. One individual citizen vis-a-vis the state. You get your ID card, your passport, that's it. That's your identity. You're done. And if you don't have it, you're non-citizen, illegal. What do you mean illegal? Huh? We have been living here, we're born here. Just because you happen to come by 100 years ago, you call us illegal. And horizontal citizenship based on principles of solidarity. Because you can't survive among fellow citizens if you don't demonstrate solidarity. So, the second principle is that you actually, when you act locally in horizontal citizenship, then you realize we are all citizens. It matters to us all. Dr. Lim made a very important point that there are serious questions about globalization. The questions are about the current nature of globalization last 30 years, starting from the fall of Berlin Wall and Soviet Union, 1990. And that globalization is globalization of the elites and the capital. It's not globalization of citizens. Global citizenship education should rest on citizens who first and foremost act locally, but they keep their global understanding and solidarity when they act locally. The farmers in northern Cambodia or the migrant labor from Myanmar to Thailand is not going to act globally in Washington or New York or Paris, but can act with global understanding locally. Once we demonstrate that citizenship matters to us all, we are the citizens. And the last point I want to make here is that pandemic has taught global citizenship with demonstrations and manifestations of concerns. Despite lockdown of physical activity, the Black Lives Matter, not just in Minneapolis. Black lives also matter in Seoul, they matter in Osaka, they matter in Cape Town, they matter in Bogota, they matter in Mumbai. Black lives matter everywhere. Women lives matter everywhere. Indigenous lives matter everywhere. Girls' lives matter everywhere. Lives matter everywhere. So citizens have learned and are learning, and we should enable them to learn more, that systemic change requires citizen action. Citizen action not just to protest, but citizen action also to reconstruct. Start the prejudices and stigmas and discrimination is also within each of us. We have to start from ourselves as well, in our collectives, in our neighborhoods, in our communities. When you look at horizontal citizenship, that's where you will put your emphasis. Yes, we need to change the police. Yes, we need to change the human rights laws. Yes, we need to change how politics is done. But we also need to change ourselves, our cousins, our uncles and aunts, who in the pandemic demonstrated their prejudices openly. So systemic change requires collective citizen action, first on horizontal citizenship as well, and then on vertical, in terms of demanding changes from governments and institutions, nationally and internationally. This is all the propaganda. Thank you very much.
Okay, can you hear me? Okay, thank you very much, Ajit Tandon. I think your presentation was really philosophical at the same time, very practical from your grassroots the experience point of view. I really appreciate your input. I think it's complemented very well. It's a more policy framework from the UNESCO, the Lim, and also your more practical and also philosophical. So with this rich input, I'd like to invite the two discussants. Both of them have been working many years on human rights and ESG field. And let's see how they have to say about your presentation. First, Anno, you have about 10 minutes presentation. You have also PowerPoint, right? Okay,
Yes.
please.
Okay. Thank you, Anselmo. I will share my PowerPoint. Okay. Can you see
Oh, yes,
my presentation? Yes.
Very good.
Okay. Thank you. So thank you for the invitation. And then I'm so honored to be here as a discussant of this title, COVID-19 and SDG 4.7. I'm Eno Nakamura, Secretary General of Development Education Association and Resource Center, we call DEAR, in Japan. I've been working here already 20 years, so my colleague celebrated my 20 years anniversary, but anyway, I really glad to see Anselmo and other speakers again, okay? So first, let me introduce a little bit about DEAR. We are a network NGO working in partnership with 40 member organizations and 650 individuals all over Japan. So we are non-governmental organizations, so independent from the government, but working with government also and community organizers, teachers, NGOs, CSOs, local government, school teachers, and students as well. So we kind of support the practitioners for ESD and global education, GSET. So we create a lot of teaching materials. And then one of them also translated in Korean and also some of them in English. You can download it, some of them. And in terms of this teaching materials, we published one of the textbook, free download textbook for talking about COVID-19 in the society. So there's some activities to share their feeling and think about coronavirus from different point of view, perspectives, and think about social change. So as you, Dr. Lin, and then, raised a lot of issues, we really want to talk about COVID-19 from different perspectives. And then they're already downloaded by many people, and we had reports from schools and communities. So you can download it, but it's only Japanese. The worksheet is also English, so please take a look. So I just thought, because, I couldn't see the, only I saw that Dr. Lim's presentation before I made the presentation. So I just put some comments and questions for Dr. Lim. So I totally agree with Dr. Lim, but for discussion, there are some questions I raised. So first, there are many lessons learned, but who learns those lessons and who doesn't? Because those lessons, I think most of the people who are here knows and learned already. But even there, the same things happen in the world, but not all people agree the lessons you raised. So who's learning and who's not? And how do we share these values with others? Because Dr. Lim raised lots of lessons, challenges, that include lots of important values. And I think that's the point we promote, GSET and ESD. So those values, how can we share with other people? And also, how do we reflect on the meaning of education? But not only education, meaning of sustainable development. I really agree with that we need to do reflection deeply on the meaning of education because of coronavirus gave us lots of hints and lots of quick questions. So this is critical time to think about what's the meaning of the education as well as sustainable development. For this point, I will introduce a little bit about my ideas and in talking about ESD a little bit. So ESD, UNESCO Teaching and Learning for Sustainable Future, they have 4 points. They look at the sustainable development with social, economic, ecological, and political. These 4 perspectives is important to look at the development issues. And they are always looked at from the cultural context. So using these 4 points, I put to look at development with natural. So because of coronavirus, give us a lot of hints to look at our development, our society. So from point of view, one of them is natural. So as you all said, the climate change, deforestation will be connected to COVID-19. But At the same time, air pollution falls, carbon emission dropped because of we just stay home. Are they happening energy transition? More plastic bags, more cars, return to business as usual? There are many questions raised because of the coronavirus. So this is natural and economic. So there are many other questions related to economic. Global economy, recession, is there new business, shortage of goods, unemployment, social welfare, economic inequality, medical disparities. So there are another perspectives to look at the society from coronavirus. And the other side is social. So there it is about human rights, discrimination, violence, media. So there are lots of issues they raise. And also the last one is who decides. This is political issues. Who decide this restriction? Who decide to, as they said, to wash your hands, stay home? Maybe this is very westernized idea, and most of them maybe can follow. Okay, power is controlled. Democracy, human rights, nationalism, is the citizens' participation is guaranteed. So this is we call compass, north, south, east, west, which we put natural, social, economic, and who decide to look at the development, to look at your society. So there are many issues come from these perspectives. But those issues were there before coronavirus. So there are natural problems, economic problems, social problems, and political problems before COVID-19. But COVID-19 revealed, make it visualized. There are more issues. Clearly, you can see these issues. So, okay, I don't want to say thanks to coronavirus, COVID-19, but still we realize, okay, those issues was before. So from these perspectives, we look at what is sustainable development, how to transform. First, is it survival or sustainable? Because of this situation, many governments started to say, okay, to survive the situation, we have to be more conservative, we have to stay home, we need more like a military to fight against someone. I mean, those policies made, used the COVID-19, but survival, is it, sustainable, it's bigger concept than survival. So if you want to survive, you have to be sustainable. But sustainable is also easy word to be used. Because some, like our government said, sustainable for economic growth. So is it really sustainable? So sustainable for what? Better development for whom? Who developed most and who not? Who are systemically marginalized? Who has power and why? And what are the deep structural causes for unsustainable development? What can we do? So there are some questions about development, our society. And we also look at the education. So I put needs and rights instead of natural in this case. So north, south, east, west, needs and rights. So there are lots of issues about access to education, special educational needs, inclusive education, lifelong learning, informal and non-formal education, free school. There are many, many issues about whose needs or rights is important and are they really respected, guaranteed. And economic also, there are lots of issues, high tuition fee, educational loan, low educational budget, disparities, city and countryside. Yes, this local is very important. That I really agree. So local side, what's happened there, inequality, digital divide. And social, how to continue active learning, because we start, many schools do more active learning before. So now coronavirus gave us to think, that opportunity to think. So how to do it? Human rights, discrimination, social exclusion, race, lots of problems. And also, who decide this policy? Who decide curriculum? Teachers' working hours, learners' participation, the purpose of education, good regulation. We have to look at who decides. So because there are lots of concepts and values, we really think important, but how to do it in practice? We need to decide who decides. So how to transform education? What is the purpose of education? What is the role of schools? Because like in Japan, now schools started to open, but they focus on the finishing curriculum most. So they stop their events, their cultural days. They just only focusing on putting a lot of knowledge. And then maybe the exam, the date of exam is not changed. So teachers are so busy to, cramming a lot of curriculum. What are new learning needs? They must have a lot of new learning needs. And quality education for whom? Who are systematically marginalized? Who has power and why? What are the deep structural causes of unfair system for education? What can we do? So we think that the fundamental purpose of ESD is to transform development and transform education. So that's why I put a lot of questions. So look at these global goals to, get these goals done. We need to be sustainable. So for making sustainable society, that's never happened on the extension line of present world because this is unsustainable. So is this there? Sustainable world is there. So we have to look at why we are still unsustainable. There are many, many reasons. Then we start to do dialogue. So those lessons has to be learned by everybody. So because of the coronavirus, COVID-19 gave us this opportunity and space. So now we had dialogue and we can make another world. Not on an extension of the present world, but a diverse world. It could be different world for the sustainable society. And we continue challenges and dialogue. It could be continuously. So transform ourselves and society must be core for this ESD and GSET. And then if we don't do that, maybe the goal could be only black, because in 10 years, can we reach that goal or not? So we have to transform now or never. This is very critical time, and I'm so glad to share with the two speakers. And then, thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Eno. Also, you gave us a lot of questions, additional questions. I hope we can find some answers to some questions, if not all, Okay, let's have one more discussion. Jeff, you also have a PowerPoint, right? Very colorful ones.
Yes, I have. So I'll
yes, please.
open it now. Okay, I will be concentrating on one aspect of this discussion, and that is basically human rights education. And what I'll do is I'll go first with you quickly about the context, and then the content, and then the process. And therefore, I am going to supplement whatever have been presented by Dr. Lim, Dr. Tandon, and by Nakamura-san. Okay, so let me just very, very quickly raise the discussion a bit at the regional level. Oh, sorry, just a minute. How do I? Okay. As you can see, with this COVID-19, we have problems with workers. They're losing their jobs or they're working fewer hours. And there's also this gender problem of more women losing than men about their jobs. And as said here by ILO, millions of workers have no income, meaning no food, no security, no future. And also survey shows, as I've said, there's a gender dimension to this crisis. We also have the phenomenon of these stranded workers in many places, from Thailand, from other places, from the Middle East to other parts of Asia. And you have all these workers going home and yet getting stranded. And you have all these people getting stranded at the border, not being able to get into their own homes, their own countries, because of the problem with COVID-19. And as you can see, even the Human Rights Commissions of Nepal is trying to get the government of Nepal to get their stranded workers home. We also have seen this question of seafarers, even those working in the cruise ships. They're stranded because their own companies cannot provide them the opportunity to go home, and their countries are not open, or there are no available transportation to go home. We see also this problem of food. The security is very much affected by this transportation problem. And with this, there is increased, actually, poverty, as much as increased hunger because of this problem of closure of borders and so on. And so in many places, because of the lockdowns and the quarantines, we need to have a subsidy given to the people who are affected. As you can see in this picture, in Thailand, they are giving subsidy to those people affected by the lockdowns. But at the same time, we have to take note of the frontliners. And here in India, there is this problem, which is true in many other countries, that they are not given enough support in terms of personal protection equipments, in terms of other things that they need to have in order to get their jobs done. There's also a lot of discrimination and stigma against them, precisely because of the supposed COVID-19 that they are carrying in that, and so on and so forth. Again, I would like to cite one Commission on Human Rights report saying that they have been getting a lot of reports of people being diagnosed with virus and being subjected to stigma and discrimination. And so you can see here, in terms of Asia Pacific, there are quite a number of countries that have locked down. Fortunately, Japan didn't, Korea also didn't, same thing with Singapore and Taiwan. But still, many more countries all around the world and in the Pacific have locked down, and therefore problems with access going in or going out of the country, and even within the country, going from one city to the other, from one province to another. And this is, again, another big problem. Mental health is a big question because people have been staying home for so long that some of them are really getting problems with violence, increasing with abuses against members of the family, and even divorce increased because of this. And so we need to address this issue. As you can see here, in the case of China, they have been trying to raise the number of hospitals that can address the mental health problems of their people. Not only those who already have mental problems, but also others who are now affected by this COVID-19. And also there's a need to address means of looking at the violence caused by this mental health problem. In the case of education, as we all know, everybody is affected by this closure of schools. And so we have this disruption. And again, we have to find means of addressing how to continue education despite the disruption. Again, a big issue is the information that we get. We are swamped with so much information, and many of them would be bad, wrong, essentially bad hate speech, discriminatory messages, and so on and so forth. I mean, we cannot live with this kind of information, or what is called by WHO as infodemic. So let's go to the issues, therefore. We have basically inadequate supply of basic needs for the vulnerable sectors: urban poor, non-citizens, persons with disabilities, minorities, migrant workers within the country, and those who are coming into the country from other countries. We have inadequate health facilities, again, for the vulnerable sectors. lack of testing kits, quarantine facilities, and even medicine. We have many problems of harassment, be they of persons who are infected or suspected of being infected, be they the frontliners, and also some of our minority groups. But in the case of India, they have this, Corona jihad against the Muslim Indians. We have also basic problem about information. Where do we get those information? What kind of information is there for the support and the facilities do we need, especially for those who are non-citizens, including foreign migrant workers? We had a little survey here in Kansai region in Japan on the Filipino resident situation in Kansai. And some of the results are like this. We have a problem with the, not only economic, but actually psychological. We have problems not only on the employment, but also on daily sustenance. Lower income, shorter working hours, and then again, anxiety. And then of course, where do you get your support? Unfortunately, for some of the Filipinos or many others, they have their support outside of Japan, or others have none at all. Now, why is it that they are anxious and stressed? Language barrier, not receiving any help. Who are they going to turn to? Or there's biased information that they get from the social media. And basically, the information they get is something that they get from their own families and on other sources of information outside of the country. So therefore, if you look at the pandemic issue, we basically look at several major issues. And again, these were made already by the previous speakers, Dr. Lim, Dr. Tandon, and Nakamura-san, that there's an issue of life and survival, healthcare, food, livelihood. There's an issue of movement, restriction of movement in our daily life. I'm not even talking of traveling elsewhere. It's how to get something that you need, basically, and you're restricted by your movement, and you have to stay at home all the time. Privacy, protection of identity of COVID-infected person, or they're monitoring their movement and their condition. It's also a question of privacy. And then communication, and also getting information. So how do you express yourselves in this situation? And how are you going to counter this mis and disinformation about COVID-19 and other issues? And also how about cure? So therefore, we are also faced with the task of government, that the government should provide health service, testing, and so on for everyone, including frontliners, provision of food, and this is very, very important for many people, prevention of spread of infection, which is basically control of movement of people during lockdowns and quarantines. Security of people. There are times when there are problems, especially from the frontliners who are being harassed, and sometimes they are, and there's a case of frontliners being thrown kind of liquid or disinfectant or chemicals because they're seen to be carriers of the virus. There's also a need for a proper and adequate and timely provision of information about COVID-19, because the more we don't inform, the more that there is a chance of people having a wrong notion about the virus. So if we go and relate this to SDG 4.7, especially in relation to human rights, well, I would think that we have to limit to some extent to the following rights. We don't have to talk of every right, but right to life, definitely, which will cover health and food and livelihood. Right to security of person, protection from any harm of persons infected by COVID-19 or suspected of being infected, or those of the frontliners, they need security. Freedom of movement. When you're restricted during quarantine and lockdown, and what kind of freedom can you enjoy? Right to privacy, protection against unnecessary revelation of name, location, and so on that we face. Right to freedom of expression, including searching for information on relevant measures against COVID-19 and support also for affected people by giving them the information that they need. And of course, finally, right to education. We need to know how to give access to any possible form of education, whatever it is that is available. So our educational goal would be to promote the use of existing government commitments. We don't have to reinvent the wheel. We just have to stress that there are existing government commitments that can address COVID-19. There are also social protection policies that address the situation of the poor and the marginalized, such as those in education, health, and employment. They are existing already. There are also projects, for example, such as a Safe Cities initiative. Again, such initiatives should be maximized. There are also intergovernmental. Again, I'm raising it to the level of the sub-region. For example, in the case of ASEAN, you have the ASEAN Declaration on the Protection and Promotion of the Rights of Migrant Workers in 2007. And then you have the ASEAN Consensus on the Protection and Promotion of the Rights of Migrant Workers in 2017. In South Asia, you have the SARC Social Charter. These are already there, and these need to be given more attention. So what is our message? In relating human rights and the question of needs and issues, my thinking is that the fulfillment of the existing government commitments on social protection and other issues achieves SDGs. If we try to fulfill all of this, then we are able to really fulfill our commitment under SDGs. Now, how do we respond? The basic question is, how can appropriate educational intervention be effectively delivered to affected people at the time of the pandemic? I think this is a very difficult but very serious problem. Now, I think we need to look at the non-formal education, which is most needed at this time, especially to be able to reach people who are most disadvantaged. The use of existing media, whether it's broadcast, television, radio, print, newspapers, or whatever other print, on online, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, websites. But also, we need to make sure that this existing media would be able to counter dis and misinformation or infodemic about COVID-19. We also need to tap specially designed mechanisms. For example, in the case of ILO, it has this project in Mekong, and it has these service centers or in some places in 6 countries that should be tapped for this purpose. Local governments, they're very, very important. As Dr. Tandon had mentioned, we need to go local. Local mechanisms are there that can support human rights. Again, we can use the UN mechanism, the UN projects, Safe Cities Initiative, Sustainable Cities Program of UN Habitat, where there are quite a number of cities involved. You can use SDGs-related initiatives at the community level on cleanliness and good hygiene, wash your hands and so on and so forth, emphasizing on right to health. Again, so we link these initiatives to COVID-19 because this is part of our right to health. And also, especially Anselmo is here, human rights cities definitely should be promoted because then again, we have all these things that are there that needs to be given more emphasis in relation to the current problems of COVID-19. Schools, I just want to cite one program, the child-friendly programs that can reach out to students who cannot avail of the new systems that can be made available. Some of them, as Dr. Tandon said, could not be able to have any online education at all. How do we reach them? It's basically the problem. We have to provide teachers, again, mentioned already, with the materials. We cannot expect them to be able to be ready to teach what we want them to teach unless they are given enough materials and information on how to teach them. Of course, we have a restriction that we have to do it within the existing curriculum. Okay, now I go to the educational content very quickly. We need to consider the current problems that affect the society as a whole, but more so the advantage. The COVID-19 pandemic becomes the context in discussing specifically SDG 4.7. That's one. The second is human rights must be discussed in relation to different people. Different rights should be discussed depending on the people that we're talking about. There's only that's not one set of rights that we can discuss. And again, we have to look at anti-bullying and anti-discrimination measures that are available, that exist in our society, in our schools. In order to promote the values that Dr. Lim was mentioning about, in order to promote solidarity, in order to promote local action, we need to have these problems out of the way. So therefore, in terms of goals, the main goals of the educational intervention during the COVID-19 pandemic in Asia Pacific can be to address the problems being faced, which is true. There's a pandemic, we have to face that. But also to review educational systems to be able to respond to the new normal that has resulted from this pandemic and also the concerns that we need to face, not only now, but also in the future. Okay, anyway, I think I finished my presentation. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Wow, it's very comprehensive. You know, it seems we have a 4 doctoral thesis, summary of doctoral thesis from 4 experts. I think nevertheless is very complementary. First, we have a very policy framework. You know, of course, UNESCO has a rich, variety of experience. It's an overview kind of framework. And then we have a second one, it's a more philosophical, practical. And then now from ESD and the human rights framework, I think we have all the material now, but I don't dare to summarize or synthesize all this. That's an impossible task, So I want to give a floor to everybody. Freedom of expression. We have a right to information. So feel free to indicate who wants to speak, and then I'll give you the floor. So you can, let's collect the questions. I'm sure there are many, Okay, let me see who. Or you can also write down your question in the chatting room. Let me check whether this is chatting room. Okay, not yet. Yerem, you are going to put this presentation in the chatting room so that they can also review some of the slides. Okay, I see the Dr. Sin, the first Secretary General of AD-Asia Democracy Network. He is one of the experts in South Korea about citizenship education. Do you have any comments, questions? I'll give you a privilege. You have a privilege to speak. You are very, from the beginning, you only, can you hear me, Dr. Sin? Okay, you can press something. I cannot hear you. Can you hear him?
Hi.
Oh, yeah, now it's okay.
Yeah. Thank you for your nice and impressive presentations. And I learned much from the 2 speakers and the 2 discussants. And my feeling or my comment is think globally, but act locally is the Dr. Tandon's impressive. And also the Nakamura-san's, the discussant was very impressive. North, east, west, south is very impressive. I can paraphrase. In other words, my words. The 17 SDGs goals and 169 targets can be summarized 4 categories: economic development and environment and social inclusion, and finally good governance. So in this viewpoint, the target 4.7 can be include the social inclusion and the environment also. So we have to sympathize. We have to stress. We have to stress that the environmental crisis. So we have to. So how to match environmental education to the global citizenship education is important, and also the effect of the education is very powerful in early childhood. So the public schools education is provided the global citizenship education, but the under the 7 years, the early child period education for the global citizenship education, how to implement global citizenship education, early childhood, early child period. It is so we have to emphasize the homeschooling and the homeschooling. In the homeschooling, during the homeschooling, we have to emphasize the global citizenship education. Thank you.
Okay,
it's
thank
my
you.
contribution.
Yeah, I hope the four speakers pick up some of the questions. I think it's been interesting. Homeschooling has now completely different meaning in the lockdown and shutdown, right? So everything is now upside down, you know. Let me, while waiting for more input and questions, I want to put several questions, not several, a few questions to the speakers so they have time to prepare. Number one is, you know, Dr. Lim, you kindly introduced some of the UNESCO initiatives, especially the Friends of group of friends, you know, to support GCD in the UNESCO effort. I think it's very important, but I think only 10 countries, and also I don't see any space for civil society, you know. Is it only government only initiative, or is open the so-called multi-stakeholder partnership, you know? So that's my question. So where is the room for CSO participation? And then there are a lot of new the language and concept related to the digitalization. You know, you mentioned about digital citizenship, right? So I'm wondering whether you can elaborate a little bit more. You know, what does it mean by digital citizenship? You know, we have a global citizenship, and Dr. Tandon said the localizing global citizenship. And also when it comes to digital, there are two important terminologies: digital divide and digital literacy. You know, which are very important for education, especially inequality. You know, could you please elaborate? You know, this digital literacy, digital divide, and digital citizenship. You know, the one. And then another question, I think this may be the Jeff and also Dr. Tandon. I don't know whether you remember this international human rights debate about wearing mask, you know, because wearing mask has a completely different cultural meaning, you know, social cultural meaning. For instance, Western, wearing mask means either you are criminal or you're patient, you know. You are not supposed to wear mask, you know. But in Eastern, you know, Asia, Japan, Taiwan, we are used to wear mask, you know, and because the result of this wearing mask was completely different, right? Contrasting, you know. So, my question is, this also relates to the culture and also the attitude. Some said, you know, the success in Eastern Asia, you know, in terms of the, you know, COVID-19 result, you know, for Japan, Taiwan, South Korea, China, because of Confucianism, because of, you know, authoritarian culture, you know. And there was a big debate, you know, whether, how to explain about different result between the Europe and East Asia, you know. Okay, so I want to especially ask so in that context, there are a lot of discourse on the concept of human rights, which has been predominantly Western, you know, but now we call international universal, whether we need to re-examine the concept of the human rights and also cultural basis of such a, the universal concept, you know, taking into account that the debate around the mask and also culture and the COVID-19, you know. So this is an open question to all, you know. Because I think this is very important because we are talking about global citizenship, but you raise a question about what does it mean by global, what does it mean by citizenship, what does it mean by the education in the context of COVID-19. You know? I think these are the key questions we need to address together. Of course, not all today, but continuously in different forums. You know, so I want to raise some of these while waiting for more comments and questions to come. You know, last one, and you know, we are learning every day the new jargon, new, you know, the technical terms. In the beginning, it was epidemic, right? Now it become pandemic, and people begin to use another term, endemic. My God. From epidemic, which is a local, pandemic means a global, endemic means globally local and locally global. Because endemic means there's no world after COVID-19. We have to live with the COVID-19, you know. It is with us, you know. We cannot get out of this. So this is completely, so in that case, still we are using the concept pandemic, but I think if you, now we are entering into the era of the endemic, you know. So do you see any difference between the pandemic and endemic in terms of your understanding and practice of COVID-19? Because many people say, oh, after this corona, we'll go back to normal, you know. But we are talking about new normal, you know. A lot of new concepts and perspective, you know. So how this affect, you know, our understanding of COVID-19? I'm sorry, our understanding of the GCED and then the SEG 4.7. Okay. These are some of my queries. This is I want to really learn from you, you know, because you have a lot of experience on those topics and issues. Let me see, there are more questions now. Chatting room or any hands up? I cannot see from my screen. Okay, if not, can I ask speakers to address some of the questions? Okay, who wants to start first? Okay, Dr. Lim, please.
Yes, thank you, Anselmo. First, your question regarding the group of friends. This is a club of UNESCO member states, which means it is open to only the governments. Not for civil society organizations. So at the moment, the members are the ambassadors of 11 countries, which I mentioned in my presentation. So again, I'm sorry that civil society organizations cannot join, but this is just a UN system, and the second question, digital citizenship. This is related with the digital environment in which we live today. In the past, literacy usually means the capabilities to write, read, calculate, something like that. But since we are living in this highly digitalized world, the capabilities to use digital technology, and of course, not only that, but of course, but also the capabilities to critically analyze and critically judge and determine the content of digital information and digital media. So that's why this concept of digital citizenship is important and underscored nowadays. And you mentioned digital gap. Digital gap is concerned with access. Some people have access to digital online and internet, while many others have no access to these digital technologies and internet communication tools. So digital gap is related with this inequality in the access to the digital world. So I hope I answered your questions, and if you allow me, let me answer the question raised by Ino-san. You raised question, who learns the lessons from COVID-19 and who do not learn those lessons? I think everybody should learn those lessons, of course, because we are facing with this pandemic, and pandemic is a global crisis, and it is very clear that in order to overcome this crisis, everybody should learn this lesson, and everybody should participate in the common effort to overcome this crisis. So it is very clear that everybody should learn this lesson. But of course, we have a difficult challenge. First, in school education, as Jeff and the Dr. Tandon said, many students have no access to online learning. Mm-hmm. So this is a serious challenge, first of all. And second of all, we have this big challenge of educating adults. So Jeff mentioned non-formal education, and the local governments and local civil society organizations have a very crucial role to play in this regard. So we have two challenges here. The overcoming the access issue in school education and expanding non-formal education for adults. Second question was, how do we share values with others? Well, this is a very difficult question. I don't know how to answer this question. This is a very philosophical question. Let me let me answer this question this way. Global citizenship education underscores three dimensions: cognitive, socio-emotional, and behavioral dimensions. Cognitive, of course, knowledge acquisition. We need first learn something. We need acquire some knowledge and information in order for us to take action. And secondly, of course, along with knowledge, we need some emotional, socio-emotional capabilities. We need to empathize with pains and sufferings of other people's difficulties of marginalized people, groups, and vulnerable peoples. So we need this socio-emotional dimension of education, and finally, behavioral aspect. Besides this knowledge and empathy, we need to take action to tackle our common challenges or the local problems and issues. So these are three dimensions of any education, meaningful education, and I think through these three dimensions, we come to share values with other people. That's my thought on this, on your question. And the last one was the meaning of sustainable development and also the meaning of education. I think this pandemic crisis provides us with a rare opportunity to fundamentally reflect upon the meaning of education, as well as the ways of our lives, the reflection on ourselves, and also reflection on the world. So at this critical time, we need to have dialogue like this forum with other people about how to overcome this crisis, but also about our ways of life and how to sustain our civilizations and our societies and our communities, and also the meaning of education. All these schools are closed and students have to stay home with their parents and teachers, but need to go to school to prepare for their online teaching or distance teaching. So we come to ask what the role of teachers should be, and what is the purpose of education, all those fundamental questions. So this is a really rare opportunity for us to deeply think about these fundamental questions. So
Yeah.
I think we need to continue our discussion and dialogue. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Let me go to, shall I go to Eno and Jeff first before I want to give the last, the floor to Tandon, because he can go also some kind of, conclusion because I need his wisdom, So just Tandon is okay. There's one question in the chatting room. Let me read. I don't know who can answer this one. It's a very general question. There are some forecasts about economic globalization may likely be impacted because of the pandemic. That means countries will likely turn toward their immediate region for economic trade instead of global is a region, surrounding countries. How such a regionalization scenario affect the idea of global, globally reduced the region, surrounding country because of pandemic. So feel free to answer this question. So thank you for the question. I think the Tatum from Singapore. Okay, Eno, please.
Okay, thank you for the Dr. Lim and also Dr. Singh about this compass. This compass is originally from British organization NGOs, and then we use a lot about thinking about development through those perspectives. And we often miss who decides. We look at nature, social, economic easier, but we often miss who decides. So, but that's the very important point to look at the issues, especially development issues, like globalization too, like this pandemic, because somebody, you can't say just one person, maybe organization, maybe enterprises, maybe big something might be in charge, and who loses and who gains, So we are like kind of big game. And even it's under this pandemic, maybe somebody gains. So we have to look at critically why, this situation is happening and why still we are unsustainable. Personally, we can do a lot of things with NGOs, but also we have to be more critical, and then we have to be more strategic. So I really like Jeff Sand's presentation, because there are already laws and human rights, so its main thing is just existing government commitment, you have to push. So sometimes education too, we have to be more critical, because even citizens organizations do a lot of issues, but curriculum is already there. And teachers just focusing on curriculum. So that's never changed. Even this pandemic, we were suffered. And like Dr. Tandon said, the lives matter. But right now, education doesn't really matter lives. They're more focused on the economic growth, or they're worried about, why not lives? So it's still, we are unsustainable, and there are lots of issues we have to overcome. So the concepts and values, really great, but how we can put the lives in the center? So that's, now it's a critical time, it's we all together to think about. So I'm so happy to talk to, Dr. Lim and Dr. Tandon and Jeff-san and all of you. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Jeff, you have the floor.
Thank you very much also. At the early stage of this pandemic, I have been reading and watching videos about reactions of people in different parts of the world, and also Asia, and particularly Northeast Asia. And what's interesting is there are quite a number of reports, videos, people speaking, ordinary people on the street, people being reported saying about something. And they basically, I'm talking about Asians, and they're basically saying that, well, we follow our government. Well, we respect our elders. Well, it's our community culture. So you may say that it is, in a sense, going back to the old system of following, you may even say hierarchical. But the point that I think that they're saying is that these things that we are following, these values that we think is important, meaning community and following rules, are the ones that seem to be helping them, whether we like it or not. There is this value of helping themselves get protection from the virus because they try to follow the restrictions that are being put on them. So the thing is that there is this acceptance, whether we like it or not. For many people, there is acceptance of the lockdown, the quarantine, and the stay-at-home thing. And one reason is because of fear. Nobody wants to get sick, but at the same time, they go back into what they have, whether it's culture, it's values, and they say, well, let's use that because that's our protection. Now, this is the point that actually I failed to mention in my presentation, where you have to talk about limitation of rights. This is the debate. How far can our rights be limited? As you can see in the reports, Americans would say, why do I have to wear a mask? I was born free. This is a free country, correct? But the question is, what about if you are the one carrying it and putting it, that affecting others, or you are the one getting it from the others? So this thing of looking at it from a certain kind of holistic perspective can limit our rights. And that is what we need to discuss. How far and how are we going to do it? I mean, there has to be some kind of context into it. There has to be some kind of discussion of measures of doing it, because we also don't want to defeat other rights while we are limiting some of our rights. Okay. Now, the other point is about the economy that was raised by Ted. I would say that there won't be really any change in globalization. It will go on. But I think the lesson that we are having here is that many of the countries are beginning to think that we have to be self-reliant economically, industrially, because when we don't, we cannot get our PPEs, our masks, and all the other things from everywhere. We have to be ready. India was producing this anti-malaria medicine, and Trump was saying, give to us that medicine. well, we have our own needs. So the point is, I think we also have to think in that way. Parallel, which we cannot avoid, this globalization thing, is how do we make ourselves self-sufficient, self-reliant, not to say no to others, but also to be able to understand that we need to have the capacity to serve our own people, especially those who are most in need. So I think it will go parallel. It will not, one doesn't disappear. The question now is, what is the mode to make sure that all of these developments, all of these lessons, as Dr. Lim was saying, and Enessa was trying to emphasize, can be really maximized in order to solve the needs that are there. And I think we need everybody's help here. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. Okay, now Dr. Tandon.
Well, thank you very much. Fascinating conversation. But it's exceptionally converging conversation. More or less, we are saying same thing coming from different angles. Now, let me start with myself. In the last 3 months of lockdown, I called many friends I had forgotten about. Many distant relatives and cousins phoned me, how are you, Rajesh? And I'm living with my 2 grown-up kids, my son and daughter. And for 3 months, we have lived peacefully, to my great shock. Because all 3 of us are used to 15 days of travel a month. So before the pandemic, we could only spend maybe 1 weekend a month together. Now, we have to cook, we have to clean, no maid, no driver, no cleaner, no nothing. Clean your floor, scrub the floor, wash clothes, wash dishes, and still be humble and smiling. Amazing, eh? So, what did we learn? As Jeff was saying, self-reliant. We have the capacity to look after ourselves, so look after ourselves. What's the big deal? I don't know about you guys, but I lived on only 4 4 shorts and 4 t-shirts. And 1 pair is left for webinars like this. And I'm in office today, so I'm wearing trousers. Otherwise, so, and 2 slippers, 1 bathroom slipper and 1 other leather. Rest of the clothes in my almirah, rest of the shoes, I have 4 belts, only 1 belt was used. The others are gathering dust. So, do we need 20 pairs of shoes? Do we need 500 shirts since we don't wear them together? So, how did this happen? It happened because we were constrained to find solutions within ourselves, first, within our immediate families, in our homes, and then within our neighborhoods and our local communities. This has significant implication for our theory of economy. One theory that has destroyed the world. It is called economies of scale. And it's no more than 150-year-old, by the way. Economy of scale is you produce in Shanghai and consume in Bogota. And because the economists always considered pollution, resource depletion, all that as an externality, it appeared to be cheaper. The moment you add pollution and all other externalities, including destruction of resource base, it is no longer cheaper. So what is the principle? Within 100-kilometer radius, produce and consume. Start with agriculture first. Why should I be eating cherries in summer in India? I should be eating mangoes. Yeah, we get good mangoes. Eh? There is no society which does not produce fruits, vegetables. Eh? If my area produces wheat, I'll eat wheat. Why should I be eating rice? Why should I be forcing somebody to produce rice? Yeah. Once in a month I can eat rice if I want, and I can afford. But we have destroyed our water bodies, our land, our soil, our habitat, natural environment, trees, forests, trying to consume, produce here, consume there. And then huge ships carry, planes carry, boom, boom, boom. What for? What for? So, principle number 1. Within 100 kilometers, produce and consume, 60-70% of your needs can be fulfilled. Why should everybody go to study in Harvard? Huh? Now that you can't go, none of the Chinese can go to Australian universities. What's the big deal? What's the big deal? 50 years ago, Chinese were stupid. Or Indians were stupid because they couldn't go to America and Chinese couldn't go to Australia. Eh? It is a farcical notion. So this is a major revisiting of economic theory. And when you have to revisit economic theory, economists are going to be the major bottleneck. Because all these economists are studying in London School of Economics and Harvard Business School.
They are losing jobs.
Yeah. Second principle is, if you want to focus on the local, think of all of you, wherever you are living, wherever your family are living. Think of that as a local, 100 kilometers. Hardly any one of us will be using English language or French or local is in local language, local culture. And both local culture and local language contain local knowledge. Local solution from local knowledge. It's only 350 years ago that we derived European theoretical constructs and applied it to everybody, which are initially in British language, then in French, and maybe a little bit in Italian or Spanish or whatever. During the pandemic, what have we heard about sub-Saharan African countries? What have we heard about Arab countries? What we have heard about what is going on in US, in UK, in France, and all this. In China, a little bit in Korea and Japan, maybe India, but we haven't heard anything about Cambodia, Laos.
Yeah.
Is this global? Is this global? No. This is monopolistic elite control over knowledge, education, and therefore hegemony over our minds. Pandemic is exposed that the healthcare system, the best healthcare system in the world is Cuba.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah. Right.
Cuba, my friend, Cuba. Only Cuban healthcare professionals travel to other countries, including US, to provide support. Cuba. Not US, not UK. The countries which produce vaccines are the first in healthcare. Why? Because production of vaccine has nothing to do with health. It is to make money. So, what did we hear about Benin? What did we hear about any other place? So if you talk about global, talk about every culture, every context. I don't think Americans know anything about Laos or Cambodia during the pandemic. But Cambodians know more about America and Black Lives Matter. Media is controlled like that. Media is in dominant 2-3 languages. Let us run the media in Bhasa. Let us see who will know. Or in Korean, or in Japanese, or in Mandarin. You know, let us not pretend that global is in global languages and global institutions and global centers of power and money. That is the main thing that pandemic is exposed. As UNESCO chair, I am telling you, we have been running a global consortium called Knowledge for Change. And in this, we promote a concept we call knowledge democracy. Knowledge democracy builds on local knowledge, which is in local language, like with the elders and with the local practitioners, local, seed gatherers and local fisher folk. And then we link it with the modern, more, knowledge in the labs and the academic knowledge. But we don't say this is superior, this is inferior. We say they cohabit. And their synthesis produces best solutions to sustainable development goals. Knowledge for change, if you visit my UNESCO chair website, you will find, and knowledge democracy. And we believe that pandemic has demonstrated the importance of humility in recognizing every context has knowledge. Don't kill those languages and cultures. Let everybody not drink Coca-Cola and wear blue jeans, please. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much. I really like, you mentioned about Cuba, I've been really following the Cuban story. Cuban medical group, they arrived in Italy, so changing the traditional concept of from north to south, this pandemic really reversed our existing, stereotyping understanding of global order, and also not only global order, all the terminologies, concepts, everything, it's really game changer. The question is where to go from here. I think in that sense, the way of I don't want to make a conclusion, but I want to highlight what Eno said. You have been focusing on sustainable development. Probably this coronavirus is signaling the end of the world development, right? So what is the alternative? Sustainability itself, or survival, or the transformation, or if not extinction. I think really as a humanity, we have to face the fundamental question within 10 years, especially the the worsening the climate catastrophe and so on and so on. Probably, as Tenzin said, starting from local again, reorganizing way of our life globally, from local to global. And that can be also one of the options together with the many others. I really appreciate all your insight. And 4 speakers, let's give a big hand to all the 4 speakers. Thank you very much. I hope Dr. Lim, you continue to provide us more knowledge, democracy, and also wisdom. And also maybe you can help us how we can, CSO can work also with the UNESCO, this global citizenship education. I think in the time of crisis, we need to get more together, Okay, thank you. So see you hopefully next time or next topic, if
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank
you.
you. Okay, bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.
Bye.
Okay, yeah.